We will call to order our town board meeting for January 28th, 2019 at 7:05 p.m. First item of order is the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Wilson, will you please lead us in the pledge?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes. I'm sorry, I went out of order. Next item of business will be roll call. Ms. Iker.
Mayor Christy Melendez.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Ken Bennett.
Here.
Miles Baker. Barry Wilson.
Here.
Paul Rennemeyer.
Here.
Tom Jones.
Here.
David Soslowski.
Here.
Okay. Next item of business is review of agenda by the board and addition of items of new business to the agenda for consideration. Are there any items for consideration? If not, I would seek a motion to accept the agenda as presented.
Madam Mayor, I move that we accept the agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Wilson, accepting the agenda as presented. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. Okay, and our system is not working tonight, so we're going to be doing a vocal vote.
Okay.
So all in favor of accepting the agenda as presented signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, agenda accepted as presented. Moving on to board liaison reports. Town Board Member Wilson, Parks, Recreation, and Culture Advisory Board, Poudre River Trail Corridor.
On the Poudre River Trail, we haven't had a meeting since our last town board, but there are some exciting things happening in 2019. There'll be a linkage going from Jacoby Farms in front of High Hops and then around Kyger Reservoir, linking that section of town to the Poudre River Trail at River Bluff, which is behind Ptarmigan. And then hopefully within this year, we'll also have a little bit more news on extending the Poudre River Trail from River Bluff and connecting with Fort Collins and Timnath, and as part of the I-25 expansion, eventually crossing the interstate. So it would be connecting over 20 miles of trail on this side of I-25, Greeley, Weld County, and Windsor, and tying that into Timnath and Fort Collins in that area. As far as Parks, Rec, and Culture, we will be, the recycling center is in the process of being moved to the Town Works facility, and there will be a gap in service that'll be communicated by the town when the time comes, probably in mid to late February, so watch out for that. And forestry has begun removal of the Christmas lights downtown, and I just want to thank town staff, specifically the forestry department and Parks and Rec. It was so well done. I just, as town board members, we received so much good feedback from the community how good downtown looked this year during the holidays. So thank you.
Okay. Town Board Member Bennett, Water and Sewer Board.
The Water and Sewer Board met last Wednesday morning. They reviewed and discussed a lot of information and data about water rates, future water needs, infrastructure, storage, treatment, those type of things for present and future needs. Looking at how we can secure our water, infrastructure, how we can treat our water so that we continue to have an adequate supply of clean and safe water for existing residents as well as in the future.
Okay. Town Board Member Rennemeyer, Chamber of Commerce.
There's no update. There's been no meeting or activity since our last board meeting.
Okay. Town Board Member Jones, Windsor Housing Authority, Great Western Trail Authority.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Windsor Housing Authority met about 2 weeks ago. They're going to go in search of an architect for the new Golden Meadows senior housing development that will be taking place over the next year or two. Also discussed for this particular, the Golden Meadows, the possibility of the construction being modular as opposed to stick-built. And apparently there isn't much difference in the price. These units they're put together out of state and shipped in. But there's a possibility if they went that route, they could be available for rent 6 to 8 months ahead of a stick-built facility. Governor's Farm is still a consideration, but there hasn't been purchase of that, but there hasn't been any new communication in that regard with the owners. And I assume you've all received a response to Mr. Soslowski's questions regarding the executive director position that we're going to be discussing at the work session in a couple of weeks. You did, good. Okay, as far as the Great Western Trail, representatives of the Great Western Trail Authority are going to meet with the Well County Commissioners in about 2 weeks to discuss a couple items. Construction, or the trail that, the path the trail follows is going to cross 6 different county roads. And we're going to have to get on the same page with their Public Works Department for designing those crossings. And another item that's going to come up, we're going to discuss the possibility of Well County helping to fund the Great Western Trail Authority, mainly in the maintenance area. Since 6.5 miles of the 11 miles are in unincorporated Well County. Right now, the 3 towns, Eaton, Windsor, and Severance, are funding all the maintenance on the entire length of the trail. And we'd like to get them engaged somehow, the county engaged, similar to what they do with the Pooter Trail. They make an annual contribution to help maintain the Pooter Trail, so we'll see what comes out of that meeting. That's all I have.
Okay. Town Board Member Soslowski, Clearview Library Board and Planning Commission.
Madam Mayor, attendees, the library board will be meeting later this week, so I have nothing to report with respect to the board meeting. I do know the library did have a citizen input meeting earlier, last Thursday. I wasn't able to attend that, but I know they were gathering feedback from citizens, so they're doing their good work. The Planning Commission meeting was last week ago, Wednesday. I did miss that as well. Thank you for letting me go off and celebrate my 20th anniversary. As my wife points out, there were added up 17 years of bliss within that 20-year period.
Better than most.
That's, thank you.
Okay. Is that your report's complete then? Okay. And I have Downtown Development Authority. Downtown Development Authority met on January 11th. The meeting summary from that was from mid-December through early January, focused on completing the end of the year invoices. They completed the reviews of wayfinding and the pedestrian crossing improvement projects at 5th and Main and 4th and Main. So hopefully we will see something happen there. We're hoping to maybe implement some changes there by summer. If we can get CDOT to cooperate with us on those projects, and if we can make some decisions here in the very near future. We completed our Main Street reporting, and again, the DDA is helping advance the backlot development and the future move of the American Legion to the 4th Street building location. So that was kind of the gist of the meeting there for the DDA. I don't have a report for North Front Range MPO. Their next meeting is not until next Thursday. However, I did attend my first STAC meeting as the representative for STAC, where all of the representatives in the state assemble and talk about their, what's going on, what their transportation needs are. Tomorrow I attend the regional TAC meeting that's going to be held in Platteville, and did have an opportunity last week to meet, so Senator Gardner was in town and held a special meeting in Fort Collins for us, and the opportunity to meet the new CDOT director, Shoshana Liu, who I think she's just maybe a couple weeks in to her position. And so I think at least with some initial conversations, I think that we hopefully have a friend to us all in Colorado who will help, who realizes the value of transportation, and somebody that hopefully will help us recognize and try to find continued support that we need in obtaining monetary dollars to ensure our transportation needs are met in this, not only in this part of the region, but in the entire state for now and our future years to come. So then moving on to item 5. Item 5 is the public invited to be heard. This is for individuals wishing to participate and are invited to be heard on a non-agenda item. Requested, I've got the sign-up form here in front of me, and when I recognize you, please step to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Then we will start the monitor up there for 3 minutes, and you will be allowed to speak. So first on the agenda item this evening is Kimberly Chambers.
What I gave to you is exactly what I'm going to say, so you don't have to read it along. I just wanted it for processing later. My name is Kimberly Chambers. I live here in Windsor. I don't wish to disclose my address because there's already personal safety concerns happening. I'm the director for Splash LGBTQIA Youth, serving young people within Windsor. My purpose in speaking and in public comment this evening is to ask the town board for some guidance around the public and somewhat statewide appearance of Windsor's leadership, not seemingly welcome to LGBTQIA community members. On January 12th, we held an extremely successful program at Windsor Clearview Library around normalizing differing gender expressions through gender identity. This event was protested at a national level as well as a local level, as many of you know. As my team tracks back the details, the controversy began when our town mayor reached out to 2 churches who she knew would spread the word. While protesting the toddler event may not have been her intention to start with, it's evidence that the lack of consequential thinking, which we expect out of elected officials. I sat down with Mayor Melendez for 2.5 hours last week and tried to desperately find some way that we could connect as humans. She gave me permission to participate in public events around substance abuse prevention and mental problems, events that would typically have representation within already. Mayor Melendez tried to restrict me from having public events here in Windsor, essentially pushing our organization and possibly community members back into the closet. She admitted that she had done no additional research about gender identity, nor the mission of Drag Queen Story Hour, but reported that over 300 people had contacted her about the event, which I pointed out was less than 2% of her constituency. The final result of that meeting with Mayor Melendez ended in calling me an extremist for asking her to make a public statement or proclamation to mediate her previous messaging of hate. I asked her to state that all LGBTQIA+ folks are indeed welcome in Windsor's community. She harshly declined with no room for further discussion on this. So I'm here tonight to request that our Town Board of Windsor create a statement, a resolution, or a proclamation that all people are welcome in Windsor, specifically including LGBTQIA community members, as a protected class. Although it may not be popular opinion of the richest or the loudest community members, this type of statement would allow with state and federal policy and does not need to include the Story Hour as an event, or the Story Hour event as a factor in releasing this reassurance. Mayor Melendez accused me personally of creating a divide in this town, and beyond the hate mail, which still continues, the endless hours of mediation. I cannot fix this alone, so I'm asking for your help. Thank you.
And just for the record, I want to state that I do not recall this conversation, and many of these things that have been put forth in this document are as accurate or true. Tammy Sanders.
I have a recording if anybody would like to listen.
Tammy Sanders.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello. I live at 21 Locust Street in Windsor, and I wish I could have put my agenda on that one too. I will only talk about the water, just for the fact I just realized that you guys are wanting to increase it again, and I'm sorry.
So this is on the agenda.
Okay.
Do you want to wait and talk during that
Could I,
time?
the other thing is yes, I would, but can I make a response to what she just said? Do you mind? Please?
It's public comment.
Okay, so Here's my thing. When I first found out about the drag queen event, my concern was not the fact of what it was promoting. I'm a fraud investigator. This is what I do for Weld County. And all you had to do was go to that individual's website and you saw inappropriate things that should have never been put up for public sight. I do not have any ways of being able to access people's accounts any special way than anybody else. I type in a name. I was able to see sites that he was stating pornographic. He was talking about inappropriate things. That was my issue as a citizen. I have children, high school children. I'm a grandmother. I have it all. And the thing is it had nothing to do with what their choice of life is. It had everything to do of background checks. I am asking that if you're going to do these things, go for it. I don't care. But make sure that those people represent a positive outlook on that type of community, not somebody that you can just go freely onto their Facebook, their social media site, and be able to look at very inappropriate things for anybody to be involved with. Pornographic, that was uncalled for. Drugs, very uncalled for. This is a community that we want to keep our children safe. Drugs is not safe. Pornography is not safe for our children. That's my problem. I don't care. If they want to dress up that way, if they want to role play, go for it. But make sure that you stay safe. Do a better background check. All it took was me to type in a name. That's it. I don't care what comes in the police reports. Police reports just aren't everything. Social media, in my job, I find out everything about them. I do it for public assistance. People don't realize how much they put on Facebook. People don't realize that if they don't lock their Facebook down, anybody can access it, and that information is free to the public. So that person was very uncalled for. When somebody else was brought in to represent the library and do this drag queen event, and they passed that check, go for it. But don't accuse us of being hate and doing hate and not accepting when it comes down to drugs, pornography, and unsafety for our children. That's all.
Next is Janine Wiley. But did you want to speak during the water?
Yes, please.
I thought it was a login sheet, I just signed it.
Oh, okay. The next person, I can't read the name, there's no address or topic. Something with the.
And I was like her.
Okay. Okay, and then Ann Kling.
Ann Kling, Library Director, Windsor Severance Library, Clearview Library District, Windsor Severance Library, 723rd Street in Windsor. This is old news for the mayor and Shane, but the library will be embarking on a one-year strategic planning initiative, and we would, of course, invite the town board and town employees, some of them, to participate. We'll be issuing the RFP in the next few weeks. Shane has already given me one recommendation for a consultant. If any of you know a good consultant who does strategic planning, please notify me in the next few days so I can get that RFP out there and distribute it to some good firms. Thank you.
And then moving on to item B, our consent calendar. Yes.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure that I know later on the agenda comes the discussion of water rates, but it's shown just as legislative action. Is there a hearing component to that where people can make comment?
It's up to you. There is no requirement for a public hearing on water rate decisions. Right. That doesn't mean that you can't take public comment.
Just
We will maybe do kind of a verbal scene of who's here to talk about water at that time when we get on that agenda item. And if we have a lot of folks who wish to talk to us about that, we can make that decision then. How's that?
Thank you.
Okay, item B, the consent calendar. We have one item this evening under the consent calendar, minutes of the January 7th, 2019 special meeting.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second?
Motion on the floor from Mr. Redemeyer with a second from Mr. Bennett, approving the consent calendar as presented. All in favor of approving it as presented signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is approved as presented. Moving on then to official board action, item C. Our first item this evening is resolution number 2019-05, a resolution approving an agreement for economic inducements and development incentives. Bobcat of the Rockies, legislative action. Ms. Young will give us presentation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and town board members. This is an approval request for incentives for Bobcat of the Rockies. They are currently located at the Southgate Business Park at the corner of Highway 34 and County Road 17. Located on this map, the highlighted area is where they plan on expanding and building a new building. Their current facility is 17,000 square feet. This building will allow them to expand, as well as opening up this other building for lease or sale purposes. The new building will consist of 24,000 square feet with a total expansion project cost of $8 million. It will also retain 28 employees while creating 7 new jobs as well. In November of 2018, we received a request from Bobcat of the Rockies. With that request, it would be consistent of development fee waivers, which includes administrative fees and Windsor use tax. The total amount of those fees being waived would be $75,779.06. It would also include development fee reimbursements, which would be reimbursed within 60 days of the certificate of occupancy. Those reimbursements include the water plant investment fee, the sewer plant investment fee, and drainage fee. And that amount totals $79,154.54. All of those amounts included for the total incentive request would be $154,933.60. This form highlights the total building permit fee estimates. At the very bottom, under the total amount, their total fees would be $393,901.04. I apologize for the writing being very small on this, but I will point to the highlighted area at the bottom right-hand corner. After doing an economic impact analysis, we concluded that the net fiscal benefit to the town of Windsor would be $345,591. With that amount, the incentive payback would be finished in 10.5 months. There would be $79,154.54 affected on the Economic Development Fund. The current balance right now is $200,000, and as you can see listed here are all the projects that we have outstanding. The dates listed by each one of them is when we expect to have those completed, with a total of $111,015.86 remaining. We are requesting approval of Resolution 2019-5 for the incentive agreement for fee waivers and reimbursements for expansion of Bobcat of the Rockies. I also wanted to let you know that Randy Vickers with Bobcat of the Rockies really wanted to be here tonight. We had to push this presentation back to tonight, originally planned for January 14th. Because of the shift in date, he was unable to make his appearance tonight, but he did want to pass on his gratitude to the town board for considering the incentives for this project. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Ms. Young.
Jill,
Dr. Jones.
when we waive plant investment fees, did we waive a raw water fee in this as well?
No.
Okay, when we waive the plant investment fees, the town is reimbursed from the Economic Development Fund, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
What
So
about
the-
the raw water?
The water enterprise is always kept whole. So if the board agrees to reimburse on the water plant, it's backfilled by the Economic Development Fund. And then raw water is something that the board has taken a position that they will never waive.
No waive.
And so whatever the cost to acquire that raw water is, they have to provide that.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, on that. Thank you, Mayor. In that vein, just because I always ask, I noticed in their application, they're referring to a 1-inch landscape pipe, and they indicate there'll be irrigated landscaping on 13,898 square feet. Is that a non-potable system separate from?
There is no non-potable. No.
Are they in Windsor Water District?
Yes.
I thought we were always requiring it. No, we're not.
Yeah, how close is it?
I see you included, at least in the board packet, also a rather detailed report that was done by the third-party consultant. It's the first time I'd seen that kind of background. I had a bunch of questions on that, but I'm certainly not going to try to get into that here. But look forward to perhaps addressing those offline
Okay.
in some separate meeting. Thank you.
Any additional questions? If not, is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve resolution number 2019-05.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Bennett with a second from Dr. Jones, approving resolution 2019-05. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 2, ordinance number 2019-1582. An ordinance fixing the compensation of the municipal court judge and the municipal court clerk for the town of Windsor in compliance with sections 13-10-107 and 13-10-109 of the Colorado Revised Statute and section 2-4-90 of the Windsor Municipal Code. This is second reading. It will require a supermajority vote. Ms. Seymour.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Town Board, you are correct. We are here today for a second reading of the annual municipal court judge and municipal court clerk compensation ordinance. The statutes governing qualified municipal courts of record do require that the compensation for municipal judge and the office of municipal court clerk be set by ordinance. We also codified this within our own municipal code. The town board has previously approved the 2019 annual budget where the compensation for the judge, both the judge, the deputy judge, and the municipal court clerk were provided for in the budget. There have been no changes since the first reading, so I recommend approval of the ordinance.
Are there any questions for Ms. Seymour? This is second reading, so we do need to see if there's anybody who wishes to speak to the board on this agenda item. This would be the opportunity. Okay. Seeing none, is there a motion on the floor?
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 2019-1582.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Bennett, approving ordinance 2019-1582. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item 3, a public hearing for a conditional use grant for a temporary recycled asphalt parking lot in the Central Business Zone District, Lot 23 of the Burlington subdivision. Quasi-judicial action. Ms. Berry will give presentation, but first I need a motion to open public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Was that you, Barry? Yeah. Okay. Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Wilson to open public hearing. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearing is now open. Ms. Berry.
Great, thank you. Again, this is a conditional use grant for a temporary recycled asphalt parking lot. As with other conditional use grants, it is reviewed in accordance with Article 8 of Chapter 16 of the Town Code. The intent is to allow consideration of uses which are unique in nature or character and that are not specifically included as uses by right in any specific zone district. The site is located, do we want to put the, thank you. The site is located in downtown off of Ash Street between 6th and 5th Streets. The site is zoned CB, or Central Business, as well as the same zoning that's found in the adjacent properties. There are 2 existing structures on the site. The proposal is to demolish both structures to regrade the lot and then construct the temporary recycled asphalt parking lot. This parking lot will replace the existing temporary parking lot that is immediately east of this property, accessed off of 5th Street. The proposal is to have this temporary lot for a 5-year time frame. The next 3 slides are some example layouts for the site. They're slightly different. These will be reviewed at site plan review time. So these are just some examples of how many parking spaces they can get on the proposed site. Conditional use standards and requirements are listed in the municipal code. These include the character of the area that the proposal would be located, and then also how to address different impacts such as visual impacts or compatibility impacts. For this particular project, it is currently located on an underdeveloped lot in the downtown. It's expected to redevelop in the future. The director of the Downtown Development Authority is here tonight, and he will speak to that greater plans in just a moment. Parking is an appropriate use for the downtown area. It's adjacent to Boardwalk Park, which is events at the park can be high traffic generators, and it is adjacent to a similar use, which is that temporary parking lot to the east. No structures are proposed. Again, the existing structures will be demolished and then the site regraded. The drainage and other aspects of the site, such as access points and how it's actually treated at the edges of the asphalt, will be evaluated at the time of site plan review. Right now, they're not proposing any landscaping because of the temporary use of the site. There's also a chance that some street improvements might be done before the 5-year time period's up, and some of that landscaping may be removed. And eventually, when the site redevelops, landscaping would have to be taken out. So, and then in general, we find that the proposal is compatible with the area and is reflective of an existing use. Notifications for the meeting were as follows. In January, affidavits of a letter of mailing, the property posted, and the legal ad in the paper. I wanted to note a neighborhood meeting was not required for this proposal. So at its January 16th, 2019 meeting, the Planning Commission did forward a recommendation of approval of this conditional use grant with 4 conditions. One is that the parking lot would be properly maintained and to accommodate the adequate areas for circulation and movement, particularly of emergency vehicles. That the applicant work with the town's engineering and public works departments to ensure that drainage is adequately addressed. Also recommended that fencing to be approved by the planning department be installed along the north property line to deter people and vehicles from accessing into the railroad right-of-way, and to use established traffic routes from the parking lot to the park. And then this just repeats that the temporary parking use not exceed 5 years, which is what was the requested time frame in the application materials. So staff does request that the following be entered into record: the application and materials, the staff memorandum and supporting documents, the testimony from this public hearing, and also the recommendation. And that's it for the presentation. Again, Matt Ashby, the director of the Downtown Development Authority, is here tonight if you have any questions, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have as well.
Are there any questions from Ms. Berry? Mr. Bennett?
Yeah, the fencing on the north side there for the railroad right-of-way, is that required by the railroad, or is that something that the DDA or the town?
That is something that staff suggested to put in.
Staff suggested that, and
right.
who's paying for that?
It would be assumed that the DDA would pay for it.
DDA is paid.
But I thought there was, that condition was asked to be removed, and somewhere in our notes that
There
it
originally
agreed
was
to be
two,
removed.
there was originally two fencing comments. One was about keeping folks and vehicles from entering the railroad right away. The second was to help distinguish where the access points would be off of Ash Street. There's a low curb there, and there's some concern that there might be some access to the site from Ash Street that would cause maybe chaos or inappropriate parking. At the Planning Commission meeting, the commission discussed with the applicant that there might be other appropriate ways to designate those access points, and that could be done during site plan. So that was the condition that was removed, the fencing along Ash Street to help designate points of access. But the fencing along the railroad right-of-way was still retained.
Dr. Jones?
What are the total number of spaces? I see 78 on one diagram, one on.
I'll have to ask the
another.
applicant to make a comment on that. I believe that the exact amount has not been determined, but there's 3 potential designs. So I'll ask the applicant what
Yeah,
the
perhaps we
latest
should hear,
version is.
yeah, from the applicant. I think he's preparing to move forward.
Madam Mayor, to answer the question to Mr. Jones on the number of spaces, we're still in the process of designing the parking lot according to the standards of the town. And so we do have 3 different options that identified different ways that the parking layout could be arranged. That was conceptual in terms of not necessarily consulting with town staff on development standards. And so there may be provisions of those that may or may not be approved based on code. But we did want to explore those different options as far as having a sense of how many spaces could potentially be included on that site.
So the 78 is one plan and the 111 is another plan?
That's correct.
Okay.
Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Madam Mayor, this is a culmination of approximately 18 months of effort in securing this property, working with the town, and we do thank you for your support on acquiring this property, and we do look forward to establishing a temporary parking lot in this location. It is central to both the DDA parcel as well as the Town Public Works Legion block to provide centralized parking. It also gives us an opportunity in the future to consider structured parking, which may be a need for us in the future in the downtown. The conditional use grant would also provide us with the 5 years' time to be able to determine the future trajectory of development in this area, which will then give us an idea of whether or not a permanent investment at this location makes sense, or if we should go ahead and identify other parking solutions. So we do appreciate your consideration of this request.
Are there any questions for the applicant? Mr. Sislowski and then Mr. Renmeyer.
Thank you. And I'm not sure they're properly addressed to you, but if you can respond. It's really the scope of the conditional use grant. Some of the materials I read suggested it was really just because it was using recycled asphalt instead of normal asphalt, and I'm not sure I know the technical difference between the two or why I would really care, other than perhaps the code itself not using the word recycled. But it sounds like there's more factors, so I guess the second question is, what exactly is the scope of the conditional use grant? Because a lot of what was being proposed, I believe, was in accordance with the zoning.
The code right now does not the code requires that parking lots be paved with asphalt or concrete. In this particular case, they are proposing recycled asphalt for this. It's a more gravel kind of surface and not a fresh asphalt paving that's required by code.
Is the board all aware what a recycled asphalt is, like the roto millings? we're all familiar with that, like Mr. Sosowski, you know the difference between the two. Like a recycled is roto-milling, so it's basically when you remove a road, they'll take it, they'll roto-mill it, they'll put it into little pebbles, and then you lay it back down with an oil base, and it's
There's no real practical, end of the day, it may be not as smooth, but there's.
Right, well, and it's probably not gonna last as long, it's gonna pothole a little bit quicker, I mean, it's certainly not, you couldn't compare it to, a parking lot, but, so I don't think the code is incorrect to require it, I think the code is correct, but I think in this case, for all the reasons that Mr. Ashby said, you know, this is, really, we don't know in 5 years, really what our parking needs are gonna be downtown, if that needs to be a parking structure, if it needs to be somewhere else, and certainly, when you compare it to where they have been parking on the back lots, this is similar. It would be a bit of an upgrade compared to what we see now. So the conditional use makes sense, but I think that the town's normal insistence that it's paved is also makes sense.
And the existing lot, or the existing temporary lot, it has recycled asphalt as well. So that'd be an example of what it looks like and feels like.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I just wanted to know from the applicant, Mr. Ashby, if the DDA was okay with the fencing, where that came from. I'm not, I don't know where you got with that, or what's the consensus of the DDA?
Madam Mayor, we just received the comment from staff and the logic behind having delineation from the railroad. Seems like a reasonable idea, but if it is an option that it's required or not required, certainly every cost component you know, that goes into this lot is one resource that because of its temporary nature, you know, it may have a better solution in the future to address that issue at year 5. So certainly we would take the town's direction as far as the improvements that you want to see.
Thank you.
Anything additional before we open to the public? Okay, this is a public hearing, so this would be the opportunity for anybody who wished to speak to the board on this agenda item to step forward. Okay, seeing none, there's nothing else from the board, I would seek a motion to close public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion on the floor for Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Dr. Jones. Moving to close public hearing. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Moving on to item 4 then, a conditional use grant to allow a temporary recycled asphalt parking lot in the Central Business Zone District, Lot 23, Burlington Subdivision. Matt Ashby, Director of the Windsor Downtown Development Authority, the applicant. Quasi-judicial action. Ms. Berry, Senior Planner, gave us presentation. Did you have anything further to add, Ms. Berry?
I do not.
Okay, and we have everything we need at this point in time for the record, Mr. McCarter?
That's correct, Madam Mayor.
Okay, anything additional from board members?
I was gonna throw out that I would like to talk about the fencing. If that was something that the consensus of the board is thus a time to either allow that in the conditional use grant or not. It was a recommendation of the staff.
It's certainly an appropriate topic for discussion during your deliberations, so
Okay.
go forward.
Do you want to have that, Mr. Rennemeyer?
Yes, I would. I would move to approve the conditional use grant without the need for the fencing requirement.
We have a motion. I just wanted to comment, I'm not certain we need the fencing. I think our concern is always safety. I appreciate that and helping the public understand where they should or should not be crossing railroad tracks. But the parking lot we have there now, in the backyard, we do not have fencing. So I have a question about how much do we really need that? Also a little concerned about temporary. I'm assuming it's not gonna be a very attractive fence. So I just have questions about it before I make a final decision on this. I'd like to hear other opinions.
Okay. Dr. Jones?
Well, I think I agree. I mean, we don't have it on the next block, east.
Yeah.
And after, you know, several years, it may start to deteriorate more than, it'd be an eyesore more than more than something we absolutely need, so I would support not requiring it.
Anybody else?
No, I'm on board as well. I mean, if it was a permanent structure, I think a fence is a good idea, looking where it's at. I mean, people are gonna park there and head over to the park. Without the fence, you know, we could have people crossing the tracks, obviously, but the fact is, there's not a fence there now. It hasn't been a problem. And the fact that it's temporary, I would be okay if we didn't require it.
Okay. Anything else? So how would we need to amend that motion, Mr. Carter?
It sounded like Mr. Rennemeyer moved to approve it with that condition being stricken. What we need is a second, and then
I'll second it.
Okay. Okay, we do have a motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Bennett. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item 5, a public hearing for rezoning petition. A portion of Windsor Manor, 7th filing, Lot 3, Windsor Manor Condo Association President Scott Gehring, quasi judicial. Staff presentation will be from Ms. Tremblett.
Yes.
And so I would seek a motion at this time to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second?
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Wilson to open public hearing. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearing is now open. Ms. Tremblett.
Yes, thank you. So this rezoning ordinance and petition was reviewed pursuant to Article 5 of Chapter 16 of the Municipal Code, Section 16-5-20, which sets forth the standards for considering rezoning applications. The subject property is located north of Ash Street, east of 13th Street, and south of Honeysuckle Court. It is currently zoned multifamily residential and is part of that parcel of the condo association. This is being reviewed concurrently with a minor subdivision application, which seeks to join the outlined portion with the commercial property to the south. And so to avoid a split zoning situation, the applicant is seeking to rezone just that 1,600 square foot portion to general commercial with a PUD overlay to match the zoning of the parcel to the south. So the petition will change this 1,600 square foot portion to plan unit development with underlying zoning of general commercial. The proposal is in conformance with the comprehensive plan. It supports high-density residential development near downtown commercial centers and mixed-use nodes, and supports maintenance and investment of existing neighborhood infrastructure and services as the town grows. There was a neighborhood meeting that was held on November 28th, 2018. The neighbors within 300 feet of the property were notified, and an ad was published on November 7th, and the mailings went out to the neighbors on November 5th. The public hearing notifications were posted with a sign on January 4th, and mailings were mailed to all the neighbors on January 2nd, and the ad was published in the paper on January 4th. At the January 16th Planning Commission meeting, a recommendation of approval was forwarded to Town Board. Staff requests that the following be entered into the record: the application and supplemental materials, staff memorandum and supporting documents, ordinance number 2019-1584, and all testimony received during the public hearing along with the recommendation. And these are the standards and criteria for you to review in your decision. That's all.
Are there any questions? Okay, Mr. Soslowski?
Thank you. The presentation, understandable. I was just looking at the application materials. There's and it's really the petition indicating the ownership of that particular weird parcel. And there's a handwritten note on that that says it's to formalize an agreement to transfer this property. But obviously, this is just a rezoning request. Is the idea once it's rezoned, it will then transfer?
So this request is being considered concurrently with a minor subdivision application. So that minor subdivision application will change that lot line so that it will become part of the parcel to the south. If you have questions as to why, I think the applicant will probably be the best person to
I'm fine.
ask with.
I anticipated that's what it was, but just want to clarify.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So again, I just want for clarification, the rezoning is to enlarge the parking lot.
So the rezoning,
No? I mean, is that not?
it will
Because there's a
essentially,
memo in
that's
there,
the
so-
minor subdivision will change that lot line. The rezoning is just so that it will match the, that property's zoning. So you don't have two different zones in one parcel.
Any further questions from the board? If not, this is the public hearing segment. This is the opportunity for anybody who wishes to step forward to address the board on this agenda item. This would be the time. Seeing none, I would seek a motion to close public hearing.
So moved?
Second?
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Wilson to close public hearing. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearing is now closed. Moving on to item 6, ordinance number 2019-1584. A petition to rezone a portion of Windsor Manor 7th filing. Quasi-judicial, we've had presentation from Ms. Tremblatt. Is there anything further you wish to add?
Nothing further.
Okay. Anything further from the board? Okay. Is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 2019-1584.
Second?
Motion on the floor from Mr. Bennett with a second from Mr. Rennemeyer approving ordinance 2018-1584. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the ordinance passes unanimously. Moving on to item 7, resolution number 2019-08. A resolution initiating annexation proceedings for the overland annexation to the town of Windsor, Colorado. Zeta Ann Steidel, Eric J. Steidel, Overland 368 LLC owner. The applicant, Julia Melisius. WHA Incorporated is the applicant's representative. Legislative action with Mr. Hornbeck giving presentation. Mr. Hornbeck.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Town Board. This annexation petition has been submitted to the town to annex approximately 173 acres. The property, the requested zoning for the property is residential mixed use, or RMU. The property is located to the northwest of Lake Osterhout and is identified in the comprehensive plan land use map as a single-family residential area. In accordance with the municipal code as well as the Colorado Municipal Annexation Act of 1965, this resolution is required in order to initiate the annexation proceedings. There will be additional town board meetings with public hearing, setting the public hearing dates and conducting those public hearings to discuss the merits of the annexation itself. A neighborhood meeting will also be required. Should this resolution to initiate the annexation proceedings be approved, there are concurrent master plan and planned unit development, or PUD, rezoning applications that would also be reviewed concurrently with the annexation and would come before town board at a future date as well. Staff recommends the town board approve the resolution initiating annexation proceedings as presented. And I do want to note the applicants are present as well, should there be any questions for them. And that's all I have.
Okay. Are there any questions? Dr. Jones?
Right now, there's no plans for commercial.
The master plan submitted does include some commercial along State Highway 257. The extent or the nature of that, I'm not sure exactly, but they are looking at some commercial.
Mr.
Thank you.
Sosowski?
So is it the petitioner's request then that this be rezoned as a condition to further moving toward annexation? Or is it our request that it be rezoned before we'll consider annexation?
When the property is annexed, it has to be zoned. The zoning they've requested at this time is RMU, the residential mixed use. So that would happen concurrently with the annexation.
I mean, it's currently single family.
It's currently unincorporated county zoning.
So our master plan identified it as single family. I think we forecast that with our kind of growth plan, but it's not zoned anything. It's unincorporated Weld County, or whatever Weld County has it as.
Okay.
Oh, ag.
Okay, Mr.
The
Bennett?
intent is that it would become residential mixed use.
Initially, yes, they've also submitted a PUD rezoning, which would be an overlay on top of the RMU. That would have some additional standards similar to the rain dance development.
So it looks like there's currently some residences within. So they're gonna have to, how does that work? They're gonna have to tap into or are they currently being served by our system? Or they will be then served by our system with this annexation, or? They are not being served currently?
They're not being served by Windsor, most likely Northwell County Water District.
And with the annexation agreement, they'll continue to just, I mean, is that part of what the annexation will require, or only to future development?
The annexation agreement could, I believe, Mr. Wagner might be able to correct me, but I believe it could allow them to continue use of the current system, or it could require a transfer to Windsor.
Any other questions?
So just so I'm clear, right now, we're just talking about beginning the annexation process. Right now, we're not changing the zoning. That would be a future discussion.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any, Mr. Sosowski, did you have anything further?
I'm just curious, I guess, what exactly is the motion before us then? Just to simply say, yes, proceed? Good luck.
Right.
Maybe Mr. McCarter.
So under the Annexation Act, before we can do any further work on the application for annexation to bring this property into Windsor from unincorporated Weld County, we need to initiate. So this resolution simply acknowledges receipt of the petition and authorizes staff to go forward with further review. The question of water service and zoning and PUD overlays and all that, that comes at a later stage, but only after we go through the statutory process for annexation of the property.
So this is a very preliminary
Oh, yeah.
step in a very long process potentially. Or
It's-
maybe not a long process, but there's more steps in this process than this.
Definitely.
That will follow.
Yeah, that's right.
So we do have a resolution before us. If there are no further questions, is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move the board approve resolution number 2019-08.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Sosowski with a second from Dr. Jones, approving resolution 2019-08. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The resolution carries unanimously. Moving on to item 8, resolution number 2019-09. A resolution establishing rates for Town of Windsor water service customers and authorizing the implementation of such rates. Legislative action, and we have Ms. Shuffle.
Humphreys.
Oh, Ms. Humphreys, I'm sorry.
I know, I keep changing on you, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So I'll be
Is this a weekly thing?
Who's
or
gonna be
is it-
giving us,
It'll take us forever.
He was supposed to be Mr. Moyer, but.
Yeah, I'm representing Mr. Moyer tonight.
okay.
So I'm Jess Humphreys, Administrative Service Director, and I'll be presenting this resolution to you tonight.
The resolution before you tonight is a culmination of the input, effort, and work put in to the strategic plan identifying water at the top of the list of priorities for the town. The research of alternative options for acquisition and treatment of water, the revision of the fee structure, and the update of the water plan to help secure Windsor's water today and in the future. As you recall, we've been in front of you about 3 times, April, November, and just recently January 7th, with Stantec Consulting on a financial model to help us calculate how to pay for operations and fund the town's participation in the Northern Integrated Supply Project, all while carefully running the balancing act of having development pay as much as possible while not stifling growth. Please note that the town's participation in the Northern Integrated Supply Project is a little over $100 million. In the resolution today, the 6.21% increase to ratepayers accounts for only 12% of the total cost of the project. The remaining 88% of the project will be paid by new development. The Water and Sewer Board has reviewed and seen all presentations as you have and recommends that the town board approves the increase. Tonight I have Ethan Harding from Stantec Consulting and John Thornhill, our Water Resource Manager, to answer any questions if you have any.
Are there any questions for Ms. Humphries? At this time, we would take a straw poll. Are there those of you who wish to come before the board on talking about this item? Can you raise your hand so we can see if there are folks who wanted to speak? Okay. Does the board wish to allow her to come forward?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Would you like to step forward at this time? Thank you.
Hello again. So again, I'm Tammy Saunders. I just would like to ask, I've read just recently that this was going to happen to our area. And when I'm looking at the rate that we just increased and now asking for another increase, that's a 9.5% increase, which is quite a bit considering the fact that, as you know, I already said I work for the government. So I'm thinking the past 3 weeks, we just had a government shutdown. We have 3 weeks right now where the government is still open. And in 3 weeks, we have no idea where the government's gonna go. And with that aspect being said, I know that we're projecting for the future of residents and the water and the lots of money that it entails, but 9.5% increase is huge, considering the fact that we have no idea where the town of Windsor really is gonna be and where our residents are gonna be able to handle that increase. I've researched, I would like to know the numbers. I don't know where they can be found to see what percentage we are compared to the state of Colorado, because you said that you guys did those numbers. I'm a statistic type of person. I work with numbers every day. So my question is what is the statistics of our percentage of what we're paying compared to every other city in Colorado, as well as county and nationwide? Because all I can say is, in my 12 years of working for the county, before I became a fraud investigator, I literally looked at Weld County water bills every day to approve public assistance. We have one of the highest bills in Weld County. And I mean, I did this for 7 years, and part of public assistance is putting in how much they pay for electric and utilities and water. We have the highest amount. And I was trying to figure out how our small little community, why it costs so much. So with that being said, we're gonna raise it another 6%. And with the way the economy is at this point, I would just kind of ask for the town board to wait maybe a couple months. I know that's asking a lot, considering that's a huge amount of money that we might be holding off on, but we don't know, is our town going to be able to afford this price increase, especially some of our seniors who do live here, our younger generation that lives here, and people who are just moving in. They're trying to pay all of these extra bills, and what happens if we have a bigger government shutdown? Are they going to be able to afford it? I know it doesn't seem like a big thing, but food assistance might go away. Medicaid, they haven't said anything about yet. But with people who may lose their jobs, that means they may not get the unemployment that, 60% of their unemployment, if that. That's a big chunk, and we do have quite a few people here living here on that, and it's gonna affect economy. If food stamp's not there, then there's not as many need for people to work at King Soopers or Safeway. People don't make the money, they can't develop their land. That's all I'm asking. Wait a couple, 9.5 is a lot. Thank you.
So, not to maybe answer to everything, but who, Mr. Thornhill or Mr. Hale, do you want to respond to any of that, or Ms. Humphries? But I first do want to make comment that this board has taken a long time to come to this decision. These conversations have not been just had in, a couple of months of conversation. We have been working and looking at this since about 2010 very diligently, and we recognize and we are very empathetic to all of our community and any time we raise any kind of rate. So this was a very hard and very long and hard thought decision. It was actually probably a decision that proactively we should have implemented many years ago. Now that we have a water resource manager in place, and this board and their strategic plan 2 years ago put water and infrastructure as a top priority, which is what has brought this conversation really being at the forefront. So we have looked at a lot of data, a lot of numbers, and so I just want to share that with you, that we are very empathetic to all of the households in Windsor, and this is not taken lightly, nor are your comments taken lightly. And Ms. Humphries?
Madam Mayor, I couldn't have said it any better, actually. We did take in consideration affordability, comparing ourselves to all other towns around us, Weld County, Larimer County, even outside of here, Colorado Springs, that have recently had larger projects, and we run right in the middle, actually, around that, I would want to say medium of the price. We're actually less than Greeley when it comes to a water bill as well. I'd love to sit down with you if you wanted to look at some stuff and. Okay.
Thank you. I would like that because I am a number person, so I appreciate I'm not saying that you guys have researched this a lot.
I'm sorry, we can't have the public, the conversation going back and forth like that, but we appreciate it. And I think she can reach out to you, or please reach out to her. You can continue to have conversations, share your concerns. She can direct you into areas, I believe, where there could be some help for folks who might need help or have certain gaps within that period of time. And can somebody just remind us, I don't have it at my fingertips, the tier 1 rate is currently at, and what it's going to, what that dollar amount is. It's in here somewhere, and I just can't find it right.
You wanted to know what it's going to?
The current tier 1 rate is 34, whatever.
It's $4.05.
Yeah, I think she was saying, because we had for 10,000 gallons,
Yeah.
what it is and what it will be. So we had that in.
We had it somewhere.
Yeah,
It's
and
like
one of
30, it's currently $34, and it's going up about $4 a month is what the rate, if we pass this tonight, would be.
I think it was the 3506 currently, and it would go up to 3740. Those are the numbers that I can recall off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay.
Make a
And
comment.
Mr. Bennett?
Yeah, echo everything that our mayor said, but I also want to say that no board member ever wants to raise rates on anything, and I do not want people to lose sleep tonight, and I don't want people to live in fear. But as we look at water issues in northern Colorado, and the west, there's great reasons to be concerned, and so we need to try to be proactive in securing water for the future, storage, treatment. I hate to use the word scary, but there's some scary scenarios out there. So we don't want to live in fear, but we need to take action now. As some people said, maybe we should have done some things 10, 15 years ago. But it's important that we try to be proactive now so we maintain the quality of water and service that we have, as well as our future needs.
Mr. Kozlowski.
And I can't help myself. I think everyone on the board had a very hard time with this issue and with this vote and with this decision. As was indicated, we had at least 3 meetings on this, and I think all of us badgered staff with additional questions and requests for further analysis, and trying to find some way that we could avoid raising these rates as indicated. I will vote in favor of this, but it's a very, very, very hard vote for me. And I think I speak for all of us in that regard.
Right. And Mr. Slawski, I would just add that, I think that certainly staff heard from the whole board that the fact that your intent was for development to pay its own way and to really put as much of this burden on development where it should be. And again, we're racing against the clock now. We're looking at around 2026 to really need to have $100 million to pay for NISP. We know that we won't have all of that cash in hand, but we know that we're going to need to have a good amount of cash, $33 million, if we're going to issue any debt. And so it's just even collecting development fees all the way until that date, we know that we won't have enough money to do that. And so again, I think the numbers have been run 100 scenarios or more, and I think the board will even recall that we looked at the idea of maybe infusing $6 million out of the general fund just as a loan. And at the time, it barely moved the needle. There's really no way to do this. So I think the mayor and Mr. Bennett said it right. Really 15 years ago, we could have incrementally started this, and it probably wouldn't have felt as painful, although our rates would be significantly higher now. So now time is against our side, and we did think of the scenario of, okay, fine, we just charge this all to development. Our fear is that we stifle so much development in Windsor. Now all the residents have a $100 million bill coming at them in a few years without any development paying its own way. So it's kind of a no-win, and Mr. Zaslowski is right. Not only did he send me a lot of questions, but everybody on the board did, and that's great because I think that nobody here likes this. Nobody here is really likes to be the bad guy and raise the rates, but again, I don't know how else we could turn the numbers other than to say if development outpaces our projections, if money comes in differently, we'd certainly, staff doesn't relish bringing these rates to you. Certainly if we could bring lower numbers in the future, we would like to do that. I'd also like to that ladies' comments, there are resources available for people who can't afford water, and we're certainly sensitive to those, and we have those on our website. And then this, as a resolution is written, this would go into effect on March 1st, and it would show up on that April 1st bill. So there is a staggering effect. If there is something randomly changing in the environment that in 2 months this looks a lot different, certainly the board would have a chance to undo it. But regardless of what happens with the state or growth, we know in 2026, thereabout our bill is due.
Mr. Wilson, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just had one comment. The district that I represent spans both Weld and Larimer counties, and I did have a couple people came to me. So just want to point out, if you're on the Larimer side of town, you don't get your water from Windsor. You get it from Loveland, Fort Collins Water District. And I did go out and research what they're doing, and they are showing like a 5% increase year over year, plus they're looking at mill levy increases. And based on what staff had said, you guys looked at even a broader area. So it's a tough situation with water, and we don't take these decisions lightly. And unfortunately, I think a lot of communities are dealing with the same thing that we are. It's a little hard to compare apples to apples because everybody has a different sliding scale. Mm-hmm. Somebody else might have a lower base but a higher charge. But overall, I agree that we're kind of right in the middle of where a lot of communities are falling.
Okay. Any further comments or discussion? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move to approve resolution number 2019-09.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Renemeyer with a second from Mr. Bennett approving resolution 2019-09. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the resolution passes unanimously. Moving on to item 9, resolution number 2019-10. A resolution approving an amended agreement between the Town of Windsor and Colorado National Sports Park. Legislative action with presentation from Mr. McCarter.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Let me get situated here. I called up an image on my screen. Can you display that for me?
What I want to start with is that the agreement before you, or the amendment before you tonight, amends an agreement that we did last September with a limited liability company called Colorado National Sports Park. Under the terms of that agreement, the town of Windsor conveyed 100 acres of property to CNSP, subject to a very restrictive deed restriction that was approved by the town board and accepted by CNSP. What we discovered shortly after that was one typographical error, if you will, but one error of substance. The first error was that we had the legal description incorrect on the transaction. So we corrected that, but then as CNSP's representatives worked their way through the process, they discovered that the restrictions in the deed were too tight and that they were not able to carry forward their plans for economic development with those terms built into the transaction. So they came to us starting this fall and then through over the holidays, and now here we are today with an amended agreement that has been approved by them as to form. Mr. Chasteen is here as a representative of Colorado National Sports Park to answer any questions you may have. But if you'll give me a moment, what I would like to do is first point to where this property is. That map, can I blow that up?
I was gonna ask you to, please.
Let me see if I can do that. I don't know how to do these things, but let me see if I can do this. Move this over a little bit.
If you hit that arrow on the right there in the middle.
Oh, that makes a little more room. Oh yeah, it
And then
does.
that arrow over there, yeah.
See, I've got assistants
There you go.
left, right, fore, and aft. So this generally describes where the 100-acre parcel is. Let me scroll down and see if I can find the other map that I wanted to show you. And I haven't rehearsed this, so you're going to have to be patient with me. This is actually a subdivision map that Colorado National Sports Park wants to present to the town. The north arrow is, help me with this. Okay, so there's the north arrow. You can see the parcel appears to be broken into two distinct parcels, sort of the lot 1 parcel and then the lower right. What we have done under the terms of the new agreement is instead of transferring the property all in one bundle, we've split it into 2 bundles that both fit into what you're seeing here. And let me further explain what you have here. This is what we are calling the unrestricted tract. Just a second, I want to double check that. That's the upper portion. That is where, at this time, the town has 3 existing ball fields and had plans to install some other multi-use fields. Those plans are carried forward in the agreement with Colorado National Sports Park, improving the 3 existing ball fields to the design that was approved in the master plan for Diamond Valley Park. So essentially doing what we would have done to those 3 ball fields. And then there are 2 more multi-use fields that are proposed. The first would be completed by March of 2020, March of next year. And another one, an additional one, would be completed by March of 2022. The idea is that Colorado National Sports Park, in these what we call phase 1 improvements, will do the work that we were going to do to those existing ball fields and also add some more playing field space for our use. Under the old agreement and under this agreement, the idea is that the town will forever have the use of the phase 1 improvements, the improved ball fields in the upper left corner, and also the added multi-use fields for future use.
Well, and Mr. McCargo, so it would be just to be clear, we would have the 3 baseball fields. We would have one of the multi-use fields, one of the 370 by 500 foot as a priority use, and then the second field that would be due in 2022, we would be kind of behind the line for CNSP and their use. So I just want to be clear on that.
So the Phase 1 improvements under the old agreement were guaranteed for us as a priority use forever. Under this agreement, the existing ball fields as improved by March of 2020, and the first of the 2 multi-use fields would have that permanent guarantee to us that we would be able to use them on a first priority basis. But under this new agreement, the second multi-use field would not be priority use for us. It would not be completed until March of 2022, and would be that we would have the second priority use to that field. So that is, as Mr. Hale pointed out, a distinction that you should note. What I've got up on the screen right now is the other parcel, what we call the unrestricted parcel. It really should be called the less restricted parcel. Let me see if I can shrink that a little for you. That parcel will have basically only one set of restrictions. This parcel is restricted only as to the uses that are listed in the amended agreement. There is a roster of permitted uses and non-permitted uses under the agreement. Let me see if I can find that. That text is in your packet materials. So give me just a moment. This is a lawyer's worst nightmare, pawing through this paper trying to find it because I know it's here. Here it is. It's on page 10 of the amended agreement. The permitted uses include adventure parks, entertainment facilities and theaters, event centers, facilities directly associated with sports program taking place on the property, food service, fuel sales, convenience centers, general commercial zoning uses by rights, except as prohibited below, health clubs, hospitality and hotel, lodging, student housing. I'm reading these because I want to make certain the record is clear. Indoor and outdoor recreation, medical centers, clinics and hospitals, retail not prohibited below, sports fields, sports-related office, stadiums, and support services for other permitted uses. And then the roster of non-permitted uses also appears in the agreement. The point of this is that this parcel that's depicted here, basically the southerly portion of the property, will be restricted only to the extent of the permitted and non-permitted uses, and that those restrictions will not appear in the deed to the property. The deed itself, which is an exhibit to the agreement, is clear of restrictions. The deed to the upper portion, the restricted portion, contains a very similar restriction to what we have today. The agreement also requires that the property now being held by CNSP must first be given back to us so we can split it into 2 parcels and convey it to them. The way that's going to work is if you approve the agreement tonight, we would accept, the next agenda item is to accept CNSP's deed back to us. We would then hold that deed until you take official action on the 2 deeds of conveyance back to them. Then we would record them in the correct sequence so that it would come back to us and then go back to CNSP in 2 separate parcels. Let me make certain. We also retain some language from the old agreement that gives the town of Windsor the right to buy back portions of, let me go back to the unrestricted parcel a moment. Any portion of the unrestricted parcel that is developed for outdoor recreation could be purchased by the town of Windsor under a right of first refusal, we'll call it, after 20 years. So again, this property must be used for youth sports for a period of 20 years, but the town has the ability, if for any reason CNSP cannot make sports programming work somewhere 20 years in the future, we would be notified, we would have the right to buy back whatever portions of this unrestricted portion that's depicted here that we wanted to repurchase. The issue before us tonight, under the agreement, it says that we will have the property appraised and we will pay fair market value for both the land and the improvements, if any, on that property that we're buying back. The reason why we're paying for both land and improvements is that not only are we getting the benefit of the improvements when we purchase it, we will have over the next 20 years received the benefit of the land through our continued use of the Phase 1 improvements that appear on this property. So the idea is that we would pay fair market value for both land and improvements for any portion of it that Colorado National Sports Park can't make work for outdoor sports activity. And that would be at our option with lots of time for us to make those decisions. The last part of this agreement that I want to talk about is our ability to release the parcels from the restrictions that are built into the deed and built into the permitted uses. If Colorado National Sports Park comes to us with a request to relax the restrictions on the use of either this parcel or the unrestricted parcel, we can entertain that, and the Town of Windsor Town Board must take official action to approve that, but that would have the effect of releasing the forfeiture and reversionary rights that are built into this agreement and built into those deeds. So in any particular case, if the town board feels that that's a reasonable thing to do, the town board can take official action to make that happen. So that is generally an overview of the agreement and the changes that were made. I want to point out that since the time this draft agreement went to you on Friday and what I have here tonight, we made three small changes to the agreement. Mr. Sislowski found a typographical error. Thank you, David. Colorado National Sports Park asked us to reinforce some scheduling language from another section of the agreement into the portion that talks about that additional multi-use field. Although I didn't think it was necessary because it's spoken to below, we did add some reference to the language below to satisfy the concerns of Colorado National Sports Park. And then the third item was we corrected the address for mailing of notices. It's an administrative thing more than anything. So the agreement that you have in your packets is very similar to what's here. It has not changed materially. My plan, if you approve this tonight, is to ask Mr. Chastain to return to Town Hall tomorrow to sign this and also sign the special warranty deed that is the subject of the next agenda item. So perhaps if there are any questions about the agreement, I'm here and Mr. Chastain is here.
Are there any questions? Mr.
Do you want to go first?
Mr. Back?
Yeah, I got several. First of all, let's say from the very beginning, I've been excited about the vision and I see the potential. I've got a couple of concerns. One, and this is a little bit of history, and this is on me for not speaking up, not recognizing this and saying it earlier. The buyback. I understand the argument that we used it for 20 years. Okay, I understand that, but I've always felt that if we repurchase the land in 2038, it ought to be at appraised value minus improvements minus what the value is today, because we're giving the land. So that's a little sticking point for me. I have some questions. The language says that Phase 1 is going to recognize the master plan for Diamond Valley.
Correct.
Okay. And so I understand that the 3 existing ball fields will be improved as per our master plan for Diamond Valley. Is that correct?
That's correct. The agreement does allow us to agree otherwise, but in the absence of an agreement otherwise, the Diamond Valley Park Master Plan, strict adherence to the Diamond Valley Park Master Plan is required.
That's what it said.
And I would say that Eric Lucas is here, but I believe that from the Diamond Valley Master Plan, as it applies to 3 ball fields, it's just that right now we use those for adult softball.
Right.
And so it's not really improvements to them in the master plan, it's really the length, to make sure we can have adult programming. We've talked conceptually with Mr. Chastain that as they go through and develop this park. If they're able to provide another adult complex that meets our needs, we can certainly see these fields shortened. You know, to us, it's not about where children's programming is and where adult programming is. Just we want to make sure that we're not sacrificing any adult programming in the interim. So so the fields are just, it's just the length that is really our concern, right? Okay.
And what you just described is a maybe.
Well, what I described is right now, until something else happens, those fields remain the length that we'd like them to be.
I'm more concerned about the multi-purpose field. There was a reason that we had identified 360,000 square feet for multi-purpose fields, and that was part of our plan. Now we're looking at 185,000 square feet, basically half of what we said we needed. And we have first priority use of that. But the second field will be built 3 years from now, okay? We may not be able to use it. And I can read the intent. The intent is that the Colorado National Sports Park would have first priority, and then we would have second. So I can see that the intent is we would have use of that, but there's no guarantee of that. So if we needed 360,000 square feet, and now we're gonna cut that in half, I'm just playing the dominoes out here. And it would look to me like at some point in the future, as our population grows and our needs go, we're gonna have to, as a town, find additional space and invest in infrastructure to build additional fields for our activities. So am I missing something here, or is that something we need to be aware that we're gonna have to do in the future if we do this?
This is less a legal question and more a Parks Rec culture question, so I'm looking at Eric to see if he can help us, help you understand the reasoning behind that.
Yeah.
And
then I will have a legal question about it too.
Okay.
Mr. Bennett, I think your question is kind of at the heart of staff's concern in terms of what does the future look like for us. This initial 185,000 square foot, or I think it's 370 by 500
With both fields, it'd actually be a little bit more than the 360, yeah.
The one is definitely a benefit to us in the short term in terms of dealing with our shortage of fields today. Where our concern is in the future is exactly what you stated. I'm very hopeful, as the board is and as the CNSP is, that they will be successful in building everything that they've presented to us. If they are overly successful, we may not have access to those fields because they're so busy. So if that happens, I can envision in the future that, you know, we are looking for seeking more field space somewhere else, or trying to find space to program in between their activities, the piece that they have first right on. So that pretty much is the staff's concern in terms of what's the future look like. I think the initial phase one in next year helps us initially, but when we get into 3 years out, 5 years out, and if Windsor continues to grow on the trajectory that it is today, you know, that is where you know, the risk for the town kind of increases, because we were going to build 600 by 600 site, and now we're down to 370 by 500 in terms of guaranteed usage.
So not to get too much into the future, but we had a couple sites planned for future community parks. Yes. I'm assuming those may or may not be appropriate for what would have gone in over here at Diamond Valley.
I think one of them will be, which is the Takankala site to the north of the Public Works site. That one probably is triggered when development occurs in that area, specifically that block to the west of 15th Street. The parcel up on that we refer to as Laboo Farms up on Crossroads is probably tied to the development of the school site that's up there as well. So to project into the future when those developments may happen, I don't know. I would hope that, you know, the town is prepared when the time comes, that we've saved up enough money that we can invest in those locations. The big concern for me isn't the money for the sports facilities, it's the infrastructure, the road expansion, the turning lanes that'll be required, the sewer extensions, the water to those locations is probably what's going to eat up a bulk of our budget that we're kind of, you know, compiling money for the sports side.
I guess I want to make the point that if we do this, that we just need to be aware that we're probably going to have a challenge in the future, next 3 to 5 years, of finding additional land somewhere or using existing lands and additional investment.
No, I think you're accurate. When you think back to where the 100 acres that we originally had, we had a master plan for all those
Right.
fields there.
Right.
That, as we spoke over the last few years to this board, we had designed what we thought we would need for build out in terms of sports facilities. Giving up this 100 acres, there is a risk there that we will need to come back and say, hey, we need to find more land, or we need to build sooner on land that we already own.
I had one more question.
Okay, yes,
I'm
please.
sorry.
No, I want you to finish.
I got one more. It's my understanding that if, and we really want it to be successful, but if for some reason the sports park is not successful, from my understanding was by the end of 2020, we would get phase 1 land back.
Okay, so the northerly portion, what we are calling the restricted portion, comes back to us in its entirety if the phase 1 improvements are not completed by the deadline set forth in the agreement. So the ball field improvements and the first of the multi-use fields must be done by March 1st, 2020, or Colorado National Sports Park forfeits that northerly portion back to us. Likewise, if they complete that but don't complete the second additional multi-use field by March 1st of 2022, they lose the property, it comes back to us. So I want to make that clear. The remainder, the unrestricted portion, is only subject to the permitted uses and unpermitted uses. As long as the uses that take place on that lower portion continue or fit the permitted uses and don't offend the not permitted uses, then they're good. We're
There's
not.
2 dates on if
Yes.
for some reason they don't get it, the ball fields and the first multi-field by the end of 2020.
Right.
It comes back, and then they have 2 more years to do the second
Basically.
multi-purpose.
Yep.
And that, are we talking about the entire restricted area then, or just the area restricted for the second multi-purpose field?
The forfeiture applies to the entire.
The entire.
Yes, unrestricted
I
portion.
just want to make sure we're clear on that. Okay, thank you.
So-
Okay,
Take up my time.
So before we get questions from Mr. Kozlowski.
What?
You do have questions.
I assume you have questions.
Plural, not singular.
I wondered if, did the applicant wish to add anything at this point in time? And then I just had a question, is the applicant agreeable to the permitted uses and non-permitted uses? Okay, so Mr. Kozlowski.
So, thank you. I guess, Eric, I probably asked you these questions more than anything, but I guess I want to kind of step back as we all talked about this when we first considered this transaction. We understood that we were, in a sense, transferring a asset of the town, and our obligation was to make sure we got adequate value back.
Right.
And at the time we looked at that, part of that value was obviously going to be the construction of 2 large multi-use fields with lighting that we were otherwise going to have to build. And we had budgeted, I believe, a little over $4 million for that aspect of these large fields. We're not going to get those anymore. We're going to get smaller fields, and we're not going to. What was the timing under your old rec plan to build those 2 multi-purpose fields? Was it going to be over the same 3-year time frame?
No, they would have been built last year, with the exception of the fact that I was behind with a lot of other projects, and that was the project that I happened to kick the can down the road.
So
Quite
we wouldn't
honestly,
even be here today?
we should be playing on them by last Thanksgiving.
Right. So I guess one of the just high-level concerns I have is we are still conveying property that has some fair market value, but what we're getting back is less. We're getting back smaller fields. We're getting them back over a longer period of time. And quite frankly, we're not even entitled to use them 100% of the time. When I add all that together, I have a harder time saying, gee, are we getting adequate consideration for what we have given? I know, I understand. So remind me the size of the fields you had initially planned?
So we had initially planned to build 1 large 600 by 600 multi-purpose field with soccer, baseball, football, lacrosse,
There was only one
Well, one big box.
Okay, so now we have two, but when you add them together, you're getting.
You add them
close.
together, you're basically talking about the same thing. We were just gonna combine them into one.
So from your programming perspective, you could live with these two smaller fields? Not ideally, but.
We can live with them, as I expressed earlier. The concern is if we don't, on the second field in terms of priority use, if they are successful, I can definitely envision the fact where they're being used, and then if we don't have access,
Sure, no, I
we're back to
understand
what I spoke to earlier.
It's a separate question, I guess. And Mr. McCarter, I'm sure this was negotiated, these dates were gone back and forth. What feels better to me, and I know I wasn't at the table, but this is whether we can move up the due date on that second field, because to Eric's point, he thought we'd have one big field this year. Now we're talking about 2022 before we'd have the second. And since we would even be using that on a second priority, I share the concern that if they are really going well and they're using it very actively, we never get to use it. So if we can't have first priority on that second field, I'd at least like to say we're second priority, but we're guaranteed X number of uses per season. So that we can look at this and say, okay, well, we may be second priority, but at least we have pick a number, 20 or some number of almost priority uses, if you will. Again, I'm just trying to make sure that we're getting adequate consideration for what we're giving. And it's changed, obviously, from what we first considered. And really, those are probably the biggest points. I think if there's some movement, if Mr. Chastain, I realize you're here, if there can be some movement on those fields, I'd certainly feel more equitable.
Good evening.
Mr. Chastain.
Stephen Chastain, Colorado National Sports Park. I think what's being misunderstood here is the multi-use field, what we're calling multi-use fields. One is two full-size regulation soccer, lacrosse, football fields. That's two complexes.
Okay.
The second, what you're calling, that would be fields 3 and 4. You're gonna have 4 multi-use fields, regulation in size. See how on the diagram it shows 4 infields for baseball on each of those complexes? That is 4 soccer, football, lacrosse fields, 8 Little League, T-ball, softball fields. Comes out to what Eric had in his master plan once it's complete. It's not just one field and a second field. There's actually 4 soccer, lacrosse, football fields.
Sorry, only to ask, is that graphic available to us here?
Yeah, that's
in the
on,
packet.
it's Exhibit C.
Page 156.
It's Exhibit C, so it's page 160. If you go to page 160, you've got the site plan, and you can see the multi-purpose field laid out there.
Not 160. Okay, sorry, thank you. Okay, so
that exhibit, Mr. Sislowski, is intended to illustrate the general location of the Phase 1 improvements. It is not intended to necessarily depict the specific dimensions. It's just an illustration of the latest conceptual plan, if you will, for the property. And it's there for illustrative purposes, but it certainly doesn't contain the specifics that the agreement contains.
right, so I see where you're describing the.
Yeah. So we keep, this is field 1, what we're calling multi-use field complex 1. That's actually 2 individual full-size soccer, lacrosse, football fields. And then 4 Little League or softball fields. And then this is multi-use complex number 2, which is an additional 2 fields. So a total of 4 individual full-size regulation soccer, lacrosse, football fields, and 8 Little League softball fields, or 4 on these corners adult softball leagues fields.
When the contract says 370 by 500 lighted purpose field, that's one.
That's this one, correct. That's the first one that we'll have in by March of next year, correct.
And number 2 would come 2 years later.
We
And I
sure
believe-
hope not. I sure hope to go quicker than that, but we have to put a date for everything just to be legal.
Let's
So-
make it 2021. And Eric, I believe what you were initially gonna plan was really something around that same size as 2 of these together.
That's correct. Basically squeezing the two together and eliminating the fields that are in the middle and the
Right.
fields that are in the middle on the outside. So basically you have 4 fields in each corner.
Yeah, but when combined, I think the math is that there's 10,000 more square feet here than what we had designed. We had 360,000 square feet. These are 185,000 per section, or 370.
And the thing to consider too, you see in the middle of the blue, we have to put restroom and recreation that, no offense, staff didn't have to, because we're public, right, or private enterprise. So I have to give up about 400 or about 40,000 square feet right here in the middle for bathrooms, walkways, concessions. So if you add in our development piece, we're well within it.
I would respectfully disagree. Our 4.1 million included road infrastructure as well as a restroom.
You didn't have a bathroom in the middle of your development though, is what I'm saying.
So what I've heard though, and what I don't want us to lose sight of, especially when you're talking about adequate consideration, that if we had moved forward with the initial plan, we would have had, yes, a multi-purpose sports complex of such, but we would not have a revenue generating sales tax instrument, which now this entity taking place here, which but for this, we now have a potential generating revenue sales tax, which we've always talked about, and especially when we look long-term, with all of the residential coming in and the needs for supporting our recreation department, we need a lot more retail revenue to follow, and we need a lot more commercial to follow. This now does answer that in place of that, which even if at some future date we now have to potentially build an additional field or multi-purpose field, hopefully we're generating revenues from some place that before was not going to be generating any revenue at all for us to be able to move forward to do that. So I just don't want us to lose sight, because I think we are gaining something that we're not bringing into this conversation.
I agree. I just want to make the point that, you reemphasize my point, is that if we do this, and yeah, the 2 fields together are actually 10,000 square feet more than we talked about, but we may not be able to use the second field. So we have to be aware that we might have to find, like you said, some other land, and so I want us to know that up front.
So that's great. I'm glad you brought that back up. So the business model for Colorado National Sports Park is sports tournaments, not recreation, not after school, not nights and when rec runs its programs. We're usually summer based, right? When kids can travel. I do not honestly now. I do think soccer, lacrosse, and football is going to be affected on those fields for 14 weeks during the heart of the summer. I do. I will tell you that.
Yeah.
Because hopefully we are successful and they'll be booked full time. There'll be people there all the time. The other 30-some weeks of the year, we're going to have stuff there maybe on the weekends. And then also we made sure, I had Ian put in there about our scheduling, about those dates, is that the rec department and Colorado National Sports Park will sit down twice a year. I prefer after Easter and after Labor Day every year to sit down and go over the next 6 months schedule. And we sit down and those dates are open. He can grab them. If they're open, we can grab them. So we can cooperatively schedule these fields in perpetuity forever. That's the plan that we have in place. So, I do think in the summer, just that second set of multi-use fields could be impacted during when kids are out of school. But the rest of the time, I really don't see it.
Well, and let's not forget, we also have an agreement with the school district on a piece of property at some future date when they decide to develop not only the school, but their sports side that the town wants to develop in conjunction with them. We're gonna have some kind of mutual agreement arrangement on whatever that potentially could be. And so we already may have that potential to fulfill whatever our next need is. Dr. Jones, you had something?
Yeah, just a couple of general questions. As far as the acreage split, is it about 50-50, restricted, unrestricted?
It's
50 acres in
really
each?
close to 50.
Okay,
Yeah, I think it's about a half an acre in our favor, Dr. Jones.
okay. And then, as far as the maintenance goes, we're going to give the sports park a check every year, and they will take care of the maintenance, 24,000 or something along those lines. And it says they'll be maintained to town standards. And I think, one part in here, it says, we will just give them a check and expect them to do whatever we've been doing in the past. So we will be monitoring that, and if the weeds get too tall, or if something seems to be out of keeping with a nice facility, we will talk to the sports park folks, and we have that authority to get on them and tell them to do whatever they have to do, right, to bring it up to standards. Okay, and then it said something about town recreation fees will not be collected, and I assume that's by the sports park.
Right, so let me speak to that, Dr. Jones. The agreement, the idea was that we wanted to make certain that town recreational programming would incur no cost for its ongoing use of the Phase 1 improvements. So aside from paying the maintenance fee, once we get through 2019, starting next calendar year, CNSP takes over maintenance, utilities, security, all that stuff, and we pay a fixed rate every year. There's a formula for modifying that number if we start using more of CNSP's fields. That makes sense, that we're asking them to give us access to more property. But back to what was the other question, sorry?
Oh, the fees.
Oh, the fee thing. Once we pay the maintenance fee, the idea is that's it. We don't pay parking, we don't pay admission fees, we don't pay head taxes, we don't pay anything. The agreement is very clear that no further cost to the town recreational programming will be incurred other than that maintenance fee.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the board? Okay. If not, Mr. McCarter, did you need to add anything?
I think I said enough.
Okay.
I hope you all understand the amendments to the agreement, and I hope you all understand why we're doing what we're doing. And my plan is, if you approve this tonight, finalize it and get it before everyone for signature tomorrow.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I'd move to approve the amended agreement with Colorado National Sports Park Resolution number 2019-10.
Second.
Motion on the floor for Mr. Rennemeyer with a second for Mr. Wilson, approving resolution number 2019-10. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The resolution carries unanimously.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Moving on to item 10, resolution number 2019-11, a resolution accepting a special warranty deed from Colorado National Sports Park, LLC. Legislative action, Mr. McCarter.
So this is the second of the three items. Now that you've approved the amended agreement requires CNSP to transfer what we gave to them last September back to us so we can split it. That's what the deed that is in your packet materials accomplishes. If you approve this, then tomorrow I will ask Mr. Chasteen to sign the deed, and then we will ask the mayor to sign the resolution approving its acceptance, and then we'll hold it until the other two deeds make their way through, and I'll explain that in a moment. So this is just a sequencing resolution more than anything.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. McCarter? Huh? No? Okay. Is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move the board adopt resolution number 2019-11.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Kozlowski with a second from Mr. Bennett approving resolution number 2019-11. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the resolution carries unanimously. Moving on to item 11, ordinance number 2019-1585, an ordinance approving the conveyance of town-owned real property to Colorado National Sports Park. First reading, legislative action, Mr. McCarter.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is the final item for this evening's presentation. What we have in the packets are two special warranty deeds, one for the restricted parcel and one for the unrestricted parcel. You know that's the restricted parcel deed because it's longer, it's got more language, and it contains a limitation on the use of the property. That's again the northerly portion, the northerly 50 acres. That special warranty deed contains the legal description that I showed you a moment ago for the portion that will contain the sports field, our sports fields, and the multi-use fields, and it's a 50-acre parcel. The other deed that's before you, the unrestricted portion, I may have gotten those mixed up. Let me back up. I'm sorry. The restricted deed is the 50 acres that is restricted by the terms of the deed to use as an outdoor athletic activity facility. That is the lower portion, strike that, the upper portion, and the other warranty deed is the upper portion that is unrestricted. So I'm sorry if I'm getting you all confused with this, but the point is we have two separate warranty deeds, each for about 50 acres. One is subject to the restrictions, one isn't. And if approved tonight, what we will do is hold those deeds until second reading, then we'll publish the following day, then we'll wait the required 10 days, then I'll ask the mayor to sign both of those. So we'll have those two deeds, and then we'll have the one that you just approved, and we will record them in sequence so that the chain of title is clear.
Anything further?
No.
Don't look left, Your Honor. Don't look
Yeah,
left.
I'm just-
Any additional questions for Mr. McCarter? Mr. Kozlowski?
So, wait, there's two deeds? What? No, I'm kidding. Just a point, Mr. McCarter, the draft ordinance you have in the minute says it's ordinance number 2018-1585, and I think it's 2019,
It
but
should be.
otherwise it's tracking.
All right, we will make that correction. Thank you, Mr. Kozlowski, for catching that.
Okay,
That's why they pay me big bucks.
okay. Is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move to approve ordinance number 2019-1585.
Second.
Motion on the floor for Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Kozlowski approving ordinance number 2019-1585. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the ordinance carries unanimously. Moving on to item 12, a community development report. Mr. Balstead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this is the, I guess, the January building and development activity report that reflects the end of year numbers that we now have. Projects under review. These are the projects that staff is currently reviewing. This is just a partial list. I would always refer you to the full community development report that we sent the link out with the last week's updates. It's on the website now. This is just some highlights from that document. We're already reviewing the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th filings of the Rain Dance subdivision. The Ridge at Harmony Road 3rd filing, which is the 3rd and final of the 3 quarter section filings, is under review. Highland Meadows Golf Course 15th filing. Those are the townhomes on the in the upper illustration that are under review. And the Eagle Crossing 5th filing, Lot 1, Fossil Ridge multifamily is the lower photo. That's the additional 5 buildings that's being added to what you see going up in the field right now. We're also reviewing the Windshire Park, the Housing Authority project. The Valley Center 4th is a commercial, the 3 buildings, I think you recently saw a presentation on that. And then the Windsor Commons Lot 4 multi-tenant is another building in the near the AgriFab project. And then we're also reviewing the plat for the Windsor Villages at Ptarmigan. Projects that are under construction are the ones you see coming out of the ground. South Hill 6 filing is at the top of the hill at the Crossroads and 7th roundabout. That's the age-restricted building. That those units, they hope to have COs on some of them here in a couple of months. The mill you've seen is going vertical now with some momentum gaining there. The Rain Dance Welcome Center is the lower right on the pond there. And then if you've been by Good Sam lately, you've seen that project is coming out of the ground as well. And East Point Plaza and Doug's Day Diner and all of those buildings are coming along. Infrastructure that's going in anticipation of vertical projects. This is just, again, multiple filings of Rain Dance. Ridge at Harmony Road, 2nd filing. We recently started accepting permits in that filing. And then infrastructure going in at Chimney Park and Schutt's Country Farms, just north of the school site, for the new PSD school site out on Fairgrounds Avenue, Jacoby Farm Townhomes, and Windshire Park 5th filings. So 546 single-family permits last year was the 2nd highest total since 2016. The combined residential dwelling units, the 938 that we saw last year, is the highest year in total in the town's history. And in December, the Rain Dance Windshire and Rain Dance first filing were the top permit subdivision. Building permits, this is just the year after year. The last 3 years have obviously been the highest in the town's history, single family wise. From a multifamily project, we're really strong in that area, setting records with Lighthouse, Highland Meadows Golf Course, South Hill, Grasslands Park, East Eagle Crossing, Chimney Park, Schutt's, Jacoby Farm, and then again the Eagle Crossing, the next phase. So these are the highest 2 years of multifamily permits that we've seen. And just a new slide regarding residential housing units by year. So again, you go back to the downturn in 2010, we were at 134 permits total for new homes. We're far and away above that now. Tracking residential lot inventory, now that since we pull that many permits, the inventory of residential lots available fluctuates greatly. However, with the subdivision approvals that the Planning Commission and Town Board has seen, that number is staying in the 600 to 700 range normally, and actually at the end of the year we had almost 900 lots available. Again, this is just the trend, you know, back during the downturn, we had a lot of lots that had not absorbed, but now we're bumping around that 500 to 700 range. Comparison to our neighbors, this slide's a little deceiving. It shows Windsor as leading the region. However, that asterisk, Severance's total is only through August, and they haven't reported the last few months of the year yet, but if they had almost 400 permits through August, I'm guessing they probably led the region. Yeah. Multifamily, we are right there with a couple of our larger neighbors with all the activity we've got in that arena as well. So think that was it. So unless anybody's got any questions.
Any questions from Mr. Ballstead?
Been busy.
Thank you for your presentation. Yes,
Thanks.
Thank you. We find this information very useful, I think.
Thanks.
Moving on to item D, communications. Communications from our town attorney.
Nothing for me, Madam Mayor.
Communications from town staff. Mr. Wagner? Ms. Miller?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Town Board. As Dr. Jones reminded me tonight, we do have an economic forecast coming up on Wednesday. Just a reminder for that. That is the 2019 economic forecast at the Embassy Suites. I will be sending out a reminder just so you have that on your calendar, confirming the times because it is quite a long time frame from like 10:45 to 1:30. So that's a long chunk of your day. So I want to make sure that that's actual activity that'll be out there. But we do have a reserve table, so you will have a guaranteed seat at that event.
Thank you. Mr. Ballstead?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that Mr. Brown came up during the action item for the conditional use grant for the temporary asphalt parking. And unfortunately, he didn't speak during the public hearing. But Mr. Brown's with the Great Western Industrial Park and Omnitrax, the railroad. And so he just wanted to let you know that the railroad does have concerns with pedestrians going to Boardwalk Park across the railroad tracks at various locations. And so I don't know if, he wasn't able to speak, and he didn't bring it up during the public hearing because the dialogue went a different direction after the public hearing was closed. And so I just wanted to let the board know that, and if you want us to work with the DDA on any alternative ways to address the railroad's concern, whether it's a fence or something else, we could certainly try and, I'm sure we can work with Matt and the DDA on something to address the railroad's concern.
Yeah, I think certainly the DDA would be amenable to wanting to have that continued conversation.
Okay.
And make sure, being able to address whatever those concerns are.
Sounds good, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Lucas, did you have anything further? Chief, did you have anything?
Nothing yet.
Okay, communications from town manager.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Okay, communications from town board. Okay, seeing none, I would seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved? Second.
Motion on the floor for Mr. Rennemeyer with a second for Mr. Wilson to adjourn. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Is there anything more about the?
You saw the